Hello and welcome. I'm Psychic Medium Roberto, and I truly hope you're doing well today. In today's case of Mystery Psychic Files, I thought let's just have a look at the 9/11 incident. Alright, let me take a moment to focus and tune in. Alright, so I'm just going to do a short episode under the cloud of retrograde. So I'm going to call up the main slide here, and on the left I have Osama bin Laden's birth details, as well as the day that he was assassinated. I have the CIA details, as well as George Bush, the sitting president at the time, as well as the formation date of the United States. So if we look at September 11, 2001, we of course have a mass of 11 twos, the mass of threes, and the outcome 14-5. Now when I started putting these days out, the first thing that struck me as peculiar is the 14-5, the outcome of the day. Now we know the events happened early in the morning, US time. So that outcome would show me exactly what's happening because it happened in the morning. And then the September the 12th reveals who's involved once the dust had settled. Now, let's go back to September 9, 2001. And you know, being psychic, I shot out of bed the evening of September the 10th, which would have meant for people living in the US, would have been like midday afternoon, the September the 10th. And, you know, when I shot out of bed, it was really strange, and I still remember it as clear as yesterday. I knew something terrible was going to happen in the world, and the images that I received were airplanes flying overhead. And, you know, when the event actually happened, we were busy having lunch here in South Africa. And I tell you, what a monstrous, monstrous, monstrous event to be perpetrated on the citizens of the United States. One, and I believe an even more preposterous, and I believe even more heinous outcome is that I believe this was perpetrated on American citizens by American citizens, sorry to say. So if we look at September the 9th, 2001, we have the 18-9-3-12-3 in that red block, which is directly linked to the CIA, 18-9-3-12-3. And of course, we know George Bush comes from the intelligence sector. That we see on September the 10th, that 19-10-1. Again, we note that number that we saw in the Boston bombing, the 10-1, a mass murder with a 9, and with the outcome of death 13-4. So that was in play and operationally on the move on September the 10th. That when we get to September the 11th, that morning, we see the mass of the double 11s, which also pings on the US. So of course it happened in the US. And the mass of threes for me is alarming in that it's all about power and control. And we see the double threes on the US formation date. And we note that 11-2-3-14-5 outcome, and the double threes pings directly on the US, which for me just solidifies the fact that this was perpetrated by American citizens. And when we see the dust settle on September the 12th, we have the double 12-3s, which pings directly on the CIA, with the outcome 15-6, which pings directly on George Bush. Okay, So in my humble opinion, and of course I haven't pulled out Department of Justice, any other agencies, but because I see on September the 10th, the 10-1, I believe there were multiple agencies involved. And the 14-5 outcome on the day of the event was a lie. Whatever story was said about the event was a lie, without a doubt. And it all had to do with money. I believe this whole event had to do with money, with the presence of the 5 on September 11. And with that 14-5, it also tells me, of course, man-made, that human beings perpetrated this event on human beings, and perpetrated by people in power with the 11-2. 11-2 is all about politics, government, and unfortunately in this case, the citizens that were affected by this incident suffered severe losses, and people that survived the event, and of course the citizens in the US and around the world, will have this event stuck in their mind for the rest of their life. And it was all about greed, abuse of power, and the bottom line, money. Now, when we pull out Osama bin Laden's date of birth, there's very little that pings on him to suggest to me that he was involved. Okay, now we note both bin Laden and George Bush has a 13-4, but there's very little else to suggest to me that Osama bin Laden was involved. Now you will note on previous episodes that the day, for example, when a body is discovered or when an arrest is made, those numbers ping directly on the day of the event in some shape, way, or form. And if we look at the day that Osama bin Laden was killed on May the 2nd, there's very little in those numbers to suggest that he was involved in this case at all. Now, that does not excuse any other crimes that he may have been involved in perpetrated against the US, but I believe he was set up as a scapegoat. And of course, we know there was high value, monetary value in oil in the Middle East. But this certainly was not a terrorist attack as the president at the time would have you believe. So unfortunately, in my humble opinion, I believe this was perpetrated by Americans, on Americans, by high-level authorities like the president and the CIA, and the blame was put on Osama bin Laden. But I don't believe he was directly involved in this atrocity at all. And I believe the onus sits directly with the CIA, as well as George Bush, and I'm sure there were other people affiliated with the CIA and George Bush that were involved here. So a terrible outcome with this 9/11 event, led to believe perpetrated by terrorists, but the terrorist was sitting in a classroom conveniently waiting for the news that he knew was coming. And of course, how convenient to position him with kindergarten kids or young kids at the time of the event. All right, let me know what your thoughts are, and I'd love to see your comments. If you have not subscribed, please hit the subscribe button, hit that notification icon, and I would just say stay safe, stay alert, and I'll see you in the next one.